Okay, you guys, welcome as always. Thank you for coming. We're going to talk about propagation today. We're going to talk about propagation from seeds. We're going to talk about propagation from cuttings, propagation from other stuff. As always, questions on anything your heart desires is absolutely appropriate. I'm not going to guarantee that I have an answer, and I won't guarantee that my answer is correct, but I will try. So we're going to start seed starting. Seed starting can be done with potting mix and a seed blocker with peat cubes, or you can just start them in the soil. Zinnias start very easily in the soil. You can just throw down your seeds. You got to make sure that you like that species of zinnia. There are lots of different zinnias that have been coming out. And one of the nice things about the zinnia is that there's a cultivar that's low. Don't know the name, I've forgotten the name. They have seeds out at the Ag Center. It's a beautiful, larger zinnia. It's resistant to mildew, which you're always going to have a problem with mildew with zinnias. This year, not so much, because we haven't had any rain. But if you plant them on a slope, the air will just flow over them, and that will cut back on your mildew. But that's a good choice for the zinnia to avoid the mildew. You probably are going to have mildew.
Also, if you cut the bottom branches off, the air can get in there, and that won't eliminate the mildew, but it'll cut it way back.
Yeah, Miss Linda has these flowers growing in her front yard. She's done away with her lawn. She lives on Manny, is it Lane or Road?
Manny Avenue.
Manny Avenue.
Down by the mansion.
Downtown. If you go by her house, you'll see that she's the only yard on this street that has absolutely not a single blade of grass.
No, that's no longer true because I planted a bunch of ornamental grasses.
Okay. But this is how, one of the things of seed starting is use a nice soil mix. There's a recipe for soil mix that is if you take and want to make your own potting soil mix, it's 16 cups sifted peat moss or cocoa fiber, 4 cups sifted compost, 1/4 cup powdered green sand, 1/4 cup powdered rock phosphate. This is an excellent recipe for soil blocking because the soil blocks will stick together long enough for your plant to germinate. When it germinates, it will, since there's a space between the blocks, the roots will do what's called air pruning. When they hit that airspace, a lot of times they'll just stop. You don't have to worry about them jumping from plant block to plant block. And this is a great way to do that. But you can also put this mix in other pots for seed starting. This is an excellent mix. Collecting ripe seed. Also talking about collecting seed from the plants you have growing either in your own yard or somebody else's yard. I usually ask permission if they're home. If they're not home. Yeah. I'm not stealing the plant, mind you. I'm just picking up the seeds off the sidewalk. Yes, ma'am. When you do that, you're gathering seed from an open pollinated plant, which means that there was no rhyme or reason to the pollination for that plant. That is something that was pollinated all by itself. So you can't guarantee what color you're going to get, what size you're going to get. Usually it's a hardy, good plant, but there's no guarantees when you gather seeds like that. Wet processed seeds or dry processed seeds. Dry processed seeds don't need any fermentation before they germinate the next year. Some of your plant seeds do. The ones that most likely will be in the tomato family, that'll be your peppers and your tomatoes. They have to ferment a little bit in order to break down the seed coat so that the embryo inside that seed's got a possibility of breaking through. My grandfather did that. He would just, and this is anecdotal, I apologize, but he would just take his tomato seeds and smear them on a piece of newspaper and let them sit in that liquidy stuff. And then the next year when he planted them, they germinated straight away. I think that's why you get all those Tommy Toe miniature tomatoes in the spring. They're wet processing in the soil all on their own till next year. You want to clean your seeds, dry your seeds, label your seeds. No matter how many times you tell yourself that you're going to remember, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of seeds next year that you have no idea. And store in a cool, dry place. A lot of people will store the seeds that they gather, or even the seeds that they haven't purchased in packets, in their freezer over the winter. The scarification and stratification, that's a process back to where seeds won't germinate unless they are exposed to certain conditions. Scarification involves physically breaking, scratching, or nicking the seed coat. So if you have a seed, usually these are larger seeds, if you have a seed that's got a tough seed coat, you want to take a little nail file or a little clippers, and you want to just put a little nick in it so the water can escape across the seed coat and swell the inside of that plant up, and you'll get germination. Stratification involves exposing seeds to cold and moist conditions for a defined period. That is, stratification is what you have to do to your tomato seeds to get them to germinate the next year. Allowing them to undergo physiological and biochemical changes that promote germination. Seeds that need inoculant.
What is that?
Inoculant is a bacteria. You can buy it in powdered form. Sometimes your legume seeds, which form a symbiotic relationship between the plant and the bacteria, where the bacteria has provided nutrients from the plant, and in return, the bacteria fixes nitrogen into the soil, making it available for the plant to gather. Our atmosphere is made up to around 70% nitrogen, gaseous nitrogen. In gaseous form, nitrogen is not available to your plants. But the bacteria will fix it in the soil next to the plant, and then the plant can gather it up. That's where your fertilizer comes in. The first ingredient on your fertilizer is usually a macronutrient, which is nitrogen. When you get a 10-10-10 fertilizer, that first 10 is by weight, that's 10% by weight of nitrogen. So the bacteria, it's a symbiotic relationship, and this is most applicable when you're planting legumes. Legumes are your mimosas, your catalpas, your peas, your beans. Anything that the seeds are born in a pod is a legume, and it's fixing nitrogen. The beauty of it fixing nitrogen is it fixes enough nitrogen not only for that plant, but for the plant that's coming afterwards. I'm not saying don't use it every time to give your plant the best possible opportunity to grow, but there's leftover nitrogen in the soil. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Plant division. When you have propagation vegetatively, like say you have a daffodil tuber or a daffodil bulb in the ground, the first year you put it in, it just sits there. The second year, it's going to have little offsets. In the third year, it's going to have bigger offsets that are capable of living on their own. Then you divide. Same way with perennials. The first year you plant, first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap, then you divide. The Rudbeckia back there and the yarrow are both perennials. The first year you plant them, they'll do okay. The second year, they'll do better, but they're not up for division yet. And the third year, they'll leap, and that's when you start to consider division of those plants. Monkey grass is so prolific that I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. Yes, it would be, but usually monkey grass is a clump. The same way a daylily, a lot of time your orange daylilies, your ditch lilies, which I love, by the way, that's not a disparaging comment. That's a clump. So yes, you can divide them.
And the daylilies, you can divide them also?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Drive 2 forks down in them and pull it apart, pull that clump apart, because those roots are all going to be matted in together.
Right.
And the double daylily, the Hemerocallis kwanzaa, is the mother of all the other daylilies. So we use it, and it's really a wonderful daylily, and it's highly prized. So when you hear people disparagingly talk about the ditch lilies, don't pay any attention to them. The daylily is the orange daylily. It lives when nothing else lives. It grows in completely adverse conditions. It grows where you don't want to cut your grass. I mean, plants don't get much better than that. If we lived in a country where it didn't grow very well, people would be seeking it out all the time. But no, Hemerocallis Hemerocallis, what's it? Kwanzaa. That's a daylily right there. Most rapid form of increasing perennials, a clump of fibrous rooted plants, that would also be true of your liriope or your monkey grass, is separated by dividing the clump into smaller portions. This is best for plants such as daylilies. Best carried out when the plant is dormant, but that plant is not dormant and it will survive just fine.
So dormant means the fall?
Yeah. Yeah, when it would have lost all its greenery and it would just be down to brown stumps, and you dig the whole clump up, and the easiest way for me, but you do it take a saw to it if you want. But the easiest way for me is to drive a big fork down in one side and take another fork on the other side and pry it apart. But that's me, because I can use my legs that way. It makes it easier for me. Vegetative reproduction in grasses includes sod, plugging, sprigging, and stolons. This is what's going on out in your yard in your grasses. The liriope, the monkey grass, isn't technically, looks like a grass, acts like a grass, but it's not really a grass. The variegated monkey grass propagates by stolons. That's why you'll find it far away from where you had the other one. The all solid green monkey grass, not so much. But these are stolons, runners, adventitious roots, and offsets. Looks like the offsets are similar to your succulents, your hens and chicks, and other succulents. Layering. This is what we were talking about when you take a stem. Did you have anything on layering?
Just not that much.
When you have a plant, this is great for shrubs, especially if there's hang on.
Oh, that works.
Yeah. Air layering is when you take a plant like this. Is that little thing an air layering tool in the box?
This is a sprout house.
Okay. If I take this plant, well, look, this is layering. So this is tip layering. You see, you've got adventitious roots right here. This plant was laying down in the soil, and it went ahead, and there's a node right here, and it layered all by itself. So if you have a semi-woody plant, if you have an abelia, if you have a hydrangea, if you have a euonymus, if you have a red twig dogwood, any shrub, you can pull this down into the soil and weight it down so that it doesn't pop back up. It will develop roots on its own. Now, if these roots were still viable, they kind of dried out. But if these roots were still viable, we could have cut, after it developed, we could have cut it right here and planted this as a separate plant. There's another way to generate roots by air layering also. That's when you see the picture up there. They took a plastic bag with moss in it. They damaged the plant below a node. This is a node right here. This will work on woody or non-woody material. Here's a node, here's a node. They damage the stem, but not cut it. Don't cut it all the way. Just damage it, like slice it. And wrap this node in peat moss or core, and you can either tape it, you can wrap plastic around it, and then keep it moist. Those roots will develop in that little bit of peat moss or core, and eventually this will be an independent plant. You cut it below here, and you take it out and you plant it. And it doesn't take as long as you might think, because this isn't a huge time expense. Now, tip layering is similar too. That's what would have happened with this. But this was natural. But if I had damaged this and pulled this whole thing down into the soil and put it below soil level, and then you can just do it that way, or you can bind it up to a stick like that so that this part was coming up out of the ground. Over time, this would have developed enough roots that it would be an independent plant. This area is super for viburnums. The big snowball bushes, now there's several other cultivars of snowball bushes or viburnums that have scents that will transport you to heaven every spring. Those are the Carlesii and the Davidii, and they get large, but not like, where you get like a 15-foot snowball bush with these. Those don't smell. They look great, you can't have it all.
The ones with the smell have a little white flower. It's about that big around. But the smell is
Transformative.
all over the neighborhood.
Yeah, people.
If anybody would like a cutting, I have one in my yard that is way too big. Let Carol know, and I will see that she gets some.
I hang out with the best people on the planet. Suckering. Propagation using suckers. Suckering shrubs such as Aronia, Bay, Sarcococca, and species roses can send up new shoots or suckers from their roots. I also have seen elderberries do this. And raspberries, not so much. Blackberries, raspberries, not so much. Those are canes that come up off the normal root ball. Grafting. I don't know if you've ever tried grafting. You know the little tomato tomatoes that come up all by themselves if you grow a vegetable patch, the little volunteer? Their root systems are fantastic. If you have another plant that you know is not going to do that great, you can cut the little plant that might be in trouble and graft it to the tomato roots. It's not that hard. You just get a little orchid clip, you cut it with a sharp knife, cut the top off of one, cut the bottom off the other, put it together, and clip it. What are you going to lose? The tomatoes come up all over the place, so you're not going to lose anything there. But that is asexual reproduction, and the top part of the plant will be exactly like the plant it came from. The bottom part will just give you your whole plant a little vigor. Grafting is used in all of the fruit production. All the fruit trees that you buy are typically grafted. They use a rootstock that's really good for your area, and they put another stalk on the top that will produce the kind of apples that you want. If you're going to grow apples in this area, Dr. Lockwood from UTTSU recommends that you grow Gold Rush and Liberty. They're both resistant to cedar apple rust. Cedar apple rust. You ever looked at an apple tree or a cherry tree and seen a glob of orange jelly growing in the spring? Well, the next time you do, that's cedar apple rust. It'll hurt your tree. Cuttings, softwood cuttings of woody plants. The softwood is the green material at the top of the plant, the top of the branch. That is the most likely to give you a successful cutting and propagation. You take that cutting, you dip it in rooting hormone. This is rooting hormone. It's a hormone for the plant that causes the plant to generate roots. I forget how much it cost. This was really old, but is it not expensive? You bought some lately?
Last summer.
Okay. Do you remember how much?
$10.
Okay. It's about the same price as it always was then. I think I paid $12 for this, but yeah. Don't put your whenever you want to generate roots, you can dip it in this stuff. Don't put your root in here. You want to pour a little bit of this out because you don't want to introduce any bacteria into this. Soft tips of non-flowering shoots, 3 to 5 pairs of leaves. Should be protected from wilting by placing in a plastic bag. Does anybody remember when your grandmother started a new rose? And she put the cutting in the soil, and then she put a glass jar over the top of it? That's to maintain the moisture level. And that's what you need to do with the softwood cuttings. Keep moist, and you can use fungicide in your water if you so desire. Semi-ripe and ripe wood cuttings, soft tip shoots of current season's growth. The green on that plant is this year's growth, firm and woody at the base. Cut just below a node for nodal cuttings or with a heel of older wood at the base. Where that new branch is coming off and there's a woody portion of the stem below it, that's the heel of the older wood at the base. You can still get roots out of that stuff. Hardwood cuttings, leafless shoots of fully ripe current year's growth, cut at the joint from previous year's growth. This is more than likely what you would be doing now. Some with a heel of older woody growth at the heel, cut just below the node on the bottom. Cut just above the node on the top. And make a wound in the lower stem just above the lowest node if it is difficult to root. Basal stem cuttings. New shoots, when about 1.5 to 2 inches high as first leaves unfurl, taken from close to the base or crown, with the heel of older woody material at the base. You see where the one on the left has the most, well, they both do, older woody material at the base. That one has a little bit, that has a medium amount. That one pretty much is all woody material. Stem tip, soft cuttings from perennials. That would be any perennial, not just woody material. Perennials don't get woody material. They may feel like they're getting woody material, but technically they die back to the crown at the end of the season and then regenerate the next season. Remember, your annuals go seed to seed. Your perennials, or your biannuals, it's 2 years from seed to seed, and then your perennials last a good long while, as long as they're in good conditions for growth. Root cuttings, I found this part fascinating. You can do this in late winter when you don't, you're desperate to get out into the garden. Vigorous young roots, preferably at least 1/4 inch in diameter, taken from close to the crown of the parent plant. Trim roots, make a straight cut closest to the crown end of the plant and a slanted cut at the furthest end of the root. Do you know why you make 2 different kinds of cuts? It's so you can tell which was which. So you know which one's up and which one's down. And I will forget that by the time I get around to doing it. Either inserted standard rooting medium or straight up or lying flat, and top dress with sand or perlite or vermiculite. That's to cut down on the loss of the fungicide, any damping off it, and to cut down on the funguses attacking it. Leaf cuttings. This is a sansevieria or snake plant or a mother-in-law's tongue. It's a great plant for cleaning the air in your house, and this is a great way to propagate it. This also works perfectly for your Christmas cactuses. Mature, healthy, undamaged leaves cut off close to the base of the leaf stalks. Whole leaves cut leaf stalk straight across. Half leaf sections remove the midrib. Scored leaf, make 1/2 cuts across the underside. Those are 3 different types of leaves. One would be a begonia leaf. That would be the 1/2 inch cuts across the underside of the main leaves. Half leaf section would be like your Christmas cactus, and whole leaves would be like your sansevieria. Place in medium, whole leaves upright, scored leaves flat, half leaf sections cut edge down. Apply fungicide in the water. Taking care of cuttings, put them in a plastic bag to keep a level of moisture. Application of fungicide in the water is okay. Cuttings from conifers. Conifers are different. They don't like to regenerate growth from the stem. So if you get any woody growth, it's harder to generate conifer growth. That one looks like an arborvitae. Does it look? My favorite conifer is a Chamaecyparis. They don't grow well around here. They like a little bit lighter soil. And simple propagation case, plastic bag, glass jar.
And if you want to spend a lot of money, you can always buy something like this that has a little vent on the top. I've never used it. There's too many perfectly cheap ways to get around it. But anyway, this is available. Okay, Carol has given you lots of ideas for ways of propagation. I'm going to go into greater detail on just a few of them. So we're going to start with the fact that there's two main types of propagation, that is sexual and asexual. By the way, this is not going to be an X-rated talk. It's okay. So the most important method, we're talking about sex now, Jack. You can plug your ears if you want. The most important method of propagation for most plants is the sexual. It gets one bit of genetic material from the male parent and another part from the female parent. They should be from the same species, and preferably not from the same plant, but sometimes you can't help that. The material from the two parents unite to form a seed, or in the case of ferns, a spore. And the new plant looks exactly like the parent plants, but they have a completely different genetic makeup. And that is important in plants because when you have the genetics of two different plants, the ability to adapt to different situations is huge. This permits plants to adapt to the environment, and they can adapt as the environment changes over time. The plants that are layered do not have that ability. These plants can colonize an area that before was not a place where the plant could live, and as the seeds, the plant embryos can lie dormant for a long time when the environment isn't such that it can thrive. For example, when it's very cold, the seed will stay under the ground and just sit there dormant and do nothing. And if there's a drought situation, the seeds will just stay also. The other type of reproduction is asexual. It's also called vegetative and clonal. I just love it when they give us all these names. Then you can get totally lost and not understand what you're doing. The vegetative or clonal is nature's way of dealing with the limitations of seeds. The offsprings of these are clones. They are genetically identical to the parent. Some plants regenerate shoots or roots or runners and layers from growth tissue that can become a separate plant. This is something that can happen without you interfering. Think of strawberries and the runners that they send out. Some plants have specialized organs, such as stem tubers in a potato. Crocuses have corms, and tulips and daffodils have bulbs. These are food storage and also a method of reproduction. These organs will store the food so the plant can survive until the conditions are right. We've all brought in tulip bulbs or dahlia tubers over the winter. It's too cold for them outside during our winters. You bring them in, they're going to lay there dormant until it's springtime when you take them out again. That's what that is all about. Vegetative reproduction allows a more rapid colonization than you get by seeds. Think of what happens to Bermuda grass. Do we all have that in our gardens, even though we don't plant any Bermuda grass? Anyway, and it's something that's very useful for plants that are on the edge of their habitat. Think about blackberries. If they're in the sun, they're going to develop seeds and they will flower and do just fine. If they're on the edge, they might not be getting enough sun to produce flowers and then consequently seeds, but they can spread by tip layering. The dangers of the asexual or clonal propagation: they produce genetically identical plants as the parents, and so all those plants are susceptible to the same diseases. In England, between 1960 and 1970, English elms were wiped out by Dutch elm disease. If only a few of those elms had been germinated from seeds, rather than by root suckers, there might have been enough genetic diversity to have resisted the disease. Okay, now we're going to talk about the natural layering of plants. And strawberries are the absolute best example that I know. The picture is a strawberry plant with leaflets. They're creeping, rooting stems. They're also called runners and stolons. If you look at the arrows, there's two. They're each pointing to some of those leaflets. If you leave them, they will develop roots. But if they're not on soil, the roots will just dry up. But if you have a strawberry bed in soil, those runners will root themselves and make more strawberry plants with no effort at all from you, though eventually you would like to cut them free from the mother plant. That's a natural method of layering. They produce by division, seeds, and layering. And be careful, strawberries are susceptible to a virus infection, so be sure if you are planning on propagating a plant, make sure it's a healthy one. We can do clonal propagation of a cherry tomato. Now this was an accident. I had planted my tomato plants the middle of May, and they were growing really well. By the way, my backyard is all shade, so all of my vegetables grow in big pots on my driveway. The cages needed some movement, some relocation, and I knocked off a great big stem off of my cherry tomato plant. So up here, the top one, you can see where the root is cut off, the stem is cut off. That's where I knocked it off. Then I was thinking, how do we plant tomato plants? We bury them deep. If our plant is this tall, we only leave about this much of the plant out of the ground in order to establish a strong, healthy root system. This plant was still actively growing, so I took this stem, stuck it in the ground as deeply as I could in that pot. And I didn't want to get rid of this one because, first of all, without that stem, the plant looked a little lopsided. Also, the stem had blossoms and some baby cherry tomatoes on it. And I'm happy to say we've been eating tomatoes off of that all summer. So don't be afraid to try something. If you're going to lose it anyway, think about what might work and do it. We have been talking around hydrangeas today and about propagation of those. Most deciduous and evergreen shrubs and climbers can root from almost any cutting. This is but the one I'm going to tell you is a never fail method that it doesn't take too much work on your part either. First thing, find a stem that has new growth that's low to the ground. The semi-ripe wood, like Carol told you, the green wood, is the best for propagation. That's the material from this year's growth. If you notice here, it's green, and here it's brown. The brown is from last year's growth. So we're going to choose that particular branch, and notice here is a node. That's a growth point. The base of the leaves are also a growth point. So between the fact that it's got the node, the leaves, it's green, and it's close to the ground, that makes this an ideal candidate for rooting. So the first thing you do is loosen up the soil underneath your branch. You might want to put in some compost or some fertilizer and make sure the soil is moist. Then finally, you take that part of the stem, press it down in the dirt, making very sure that the node and the leaves are in contact with the dirt, and then put something over the top of it, like a brick, and just let it sit there for a while. Maybe a season or two, depending on the season. If you do this in the spring, probably it'll be rooting by the summer. If you're doing it in the fall, yeah, wait till spring. It'll take a little longer. So finally, here is our stem, and you can see some roots. What I forgot to tell you about this, make sure you leave that stem attached to the mother plant. The mother plant is going to keep on supporting it while you're rooting it. I apologize, that was an important thing to leave out. All you have to do during the time that you're letting the roots form is make sure that the soil doesn't dry out. When you take a peek and find a healthy growth of roots, cut the branch from the plant and find that brand new plant a nice place in your yard. Or give it to a neighbor who's always admired your clematis. Hydrangea, excuse me. Carol's talked about gathering seeds at home, and in general, remember that if you want to do that, they should be from a species, not from a hybrid. So what do I mean by that? A zinnia is a species. If you want to take seeds from your wave petunia, first of all, I don't think you're ever going to find any seeds on a wave petunia. But if you do, they're not viable at all because those are hybrids. Ideally, get your seeds from a strong plant that has the characteristics that you're looking for. If you want a very pink zinnia, find the pinkest zinnias in your garden and take the seeds from them. There's no guarantee, but you got a better chance. The seeds from a hardy plant don't necessarily produce hardy offspring, but it's more likely. And also, seeds from your own garden very often produce plants that are better adapted to the local conditions. I think that's all I wanted to tell you about plants. If you don't have any questions, please take some plants.
Thank you. If you have any questions, just holler at us. We're here to help.